The internet, a vast sprawling network connecting billions across the globe. Yet beneath the surface of this digital world lurks a dark side, a place where dangerous ideologies fester and spread like a virus. This is the breeding ground for online radicalization, a growing threat that preys on the vulnerable, particularly young minds. It's a silent epidemic, often hidden from view, but its consequences are very real and very dangerous. It's about the subtle yet powerful influence of online echo chambers, places where anger, hate and misinformation are amplified, warping perceptions and fueling extremism. Young people, often grappling with identity, belonging and purpose, are particularly susceptible. This virtual refuge can quickly become a trap, leading them down a dangerous path. This is a story we need to tell. Online radicalization is a complex process, a slow burn that gradually draws individuals towards extreme beliefs and behaviors. It often begins with exposure to fringe ideas, presented in a way that seems appealing or even heroic. Extremist groups and individuals exploit online platforms to spread their messages, often disguised as harmless discussions or entertainment. They create echo chambers, online communities where their target audience is constantly bombarded with the same biased information, reinforcing their beliefs and isolating them from alternative viewpoints. This is how online radicalization takes hold. One particularly disturbing manifestation of online radicalization is the rise of the incel subculture. Short for involuntary celibate, incels are a predominantly male online community united by a shared grievance, their perceived inability to find romantic or sexual partners. While this might seem like a superficial concern, the incel ideology goes far deeper, rooted in a toxic mix of misogyny, self-pity, and a warped sense of entitlement. Incels view women not as individuals but as objects of desire responsible for their unhappiness and lack of fulfillment. This resentment festers in online forums and chat rooms where incels find a sense of community and validation for their distorted worldview. These online spaces become echo chambers of anger and hatred, where incels encourage and radicalize each other. This is why understanding the incel phenomenon is crucial. The internet, for all its merits, has become a fertile breeding ground for toxic masculinity. Forums, social media platforms and online gaming communities, often perceived as harmless avenues for connection and entertainment, can quickly morph into echo chambers where traditional and often damaging notions of manhood are reinforced and celebrated. These digital spaces, cloaked in anonymity and fueled by a lack of accountability, embolden individuals to shed social inhibitions and embrace extreme personas. Young boys, especially those struggling with identity and belonging, are particularly vulnerable to the allure of these hyper-masculine online environments. This constant barrage of toxic masculinity seeps into the subconscious, slowly warping perceptions of what it means to be a man in the 21st century. Section 2. Toxic masculinity, the fuel for the fire. At its core, toxic masculinity promotes a narrow and damaging definition of manhood, one that glorifies dominance, aggression and emotional stoicism while simultaneously devaluing empathy, vulnerability and respect for women. This skewed worldview, often perpetuated through generations, finds fertile ground in the anonymity and lack of accountability characteristic of many online spaces. Social media platforms, with their emphasis on likes, followers, and virtual validation, further exacerbate this issue. Young boys, bombarded with images of hyper-masculine ideals, often feel pressured to conform to these unrealistic standards of physical prowess, emotional detachment, and sexual conquest. This constant comparison and competition can lead to feelings of inadequacy, fueling a desire for validation within online communities where toxic masculinity reigns supreme. Section 3. A warped sense of self. The impact on young minds. The constant exposure to toxic masculinity online can have a profound and damaging impact on the development of young minds. Boys, bombarded with these harmful ideologies during crucial developmental years, may internalize these distorted views of gender roles, relationships and self-worth, leading to a warped sense of self and a disconnect from their own emotions. The suppression of vulnerability, often touted as a cornerstone of traditional masculinity, can lead to difficulty forming genuine connections, expressing emotions healthily, and seeking help when needed. This emotional suppression, coupled with the constant pressure to conform to unrealistic masculine ideals, can create a breeding ground for frustration, anger, and resentment. Section 1. The Vulnerable Crossroads, Seeds of Isolation and Frustration. Imagine a young man, perhaps in his late teens, grappling with the tumultuous emotions of adolescence. School feels like a pressure cooker of social hierarchy and academic expectation. He might be struggling to fit in, feeling like an outsider peering into a world he doesn't quite belong to. This feeling of isolation, this gnawing sense of not belonging, can be incredibly powerful, especially in the formative years of adolescence. The seductive lure, finding solace in virtual belonging. Within these online communities, often characterized by anonymity and a lack of real-world accountability, he encounters others who seem to speak his language, who understand his frustrations and validate his feelings of anger, resentment, or inadequacy. They offer a sense of belonging he desperately craves, a brotherhood of shared experiences and grievances. The virtual world, once a mere escape from the challenges of reality, begins to feel more real, more validating than his offline life. The algorithms that govern these online spaces, designed to maximize engagement and keep users hooked, further reinforce this sense of belonging. Echo chambers of extremism, amplifying anger and hate. The anger and frustration that initially drew him to these online spaces are not only validated, but actively encouraged and amplified. He is bombarded with hateful rhetoric, conspiracy theories, and misogynistic views presented as undeniable truths. The line between virtual bravado and real-world consequences blurs as he becomes desensitized to violence, intolerance, and the dehumanization of others. The more time he spends in these echo chambers, the more his perception of reality becomes distorted, shaped by the constant barrage of extremist propaganda and the validation he receives from his online peers. A steady drip of poison normalizing misogyny and violence. The normalization of misogyny and violence within these online communities is particularly insidious. What begins as seemingly harmless jokes or expressions of frustration gradually escalates into something far more sinister. This constant exposure to misogynistic views, coupled with the lack of counter-narratives or positive role models within these echo chambers, can have a profound impact on his perception of women and relationships. The internet, instead of being a tool for connection and positive exploration, becomes a breeding ground for his anger, resentment, and distorted worldview. Behind the screen, human lives, real consequences. The internet can feel like a different world, a detached realm where actions have no weight and words evaporate into the digital ether. But the truth is, the online world and the real world are inextricably intertwined. The consequences of online radicalization, particularly among young people, are far from virtual. They manifest in the real world with terrifying and heartbreaking regularity. Behind the screen names, the avatars, and the inflammatory rhetoric are real human beings grappling with real emotions, and their actions have real-world consequences. Section 2. A Mother's Nightmare. The Heartbreak of Radicalization. For Susan, a single mother from a small town, the internet had always been a source of both wonder and worry. She had witnessed firsthand how easily her son Ethan could get lost in the digital world, spending hours each day on social media and online gaming platforms. She had tried to stay involved in his online life, monitoring his activity and encouraging him to engage in offline activities. But it felt like an uphill battle. Ethan, like many teenagers, guarded his online life fiercely, seeing his mother's attempts to connect as intrusive and overbearing. Susan's worst fears were realized when she discovered that Ethan had been spending hours each day in online forums dedicated to extremist ideologies. The once bright, curious boy she knew had become withdrawn, sullen, and increasingly hostile towards her and others. He would spend hours closeted in his room, the glow of the computer screen illuminating his face. His eyes glazed over with a mixture of anger and detachment. When she confronted him, she was met with a wall of silence, a cold, impenetrable barrier that seemed to separate them completely. She felt helpless, lost in a digital labyrinth where she didn't speak the language and couldn't understand the rules. The realization that her son, her flesh and blood, had been radicalized online, transformed from a loving, empathetic boy into a stranger filled with hate, was a nightmare come true, a pain that cut her to her very core. Section 3, From Lost to Found, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. The stories of Daniel and Ethan, though fictionalized, reflect a chilling reality. The devastating consequences of online radicalization are playing out in homes and communities around the world. But amidst the darkness, there are glimmers of hope, stories of redemption and resilience that offer a ray of light in the face of despair. Organizations like Exit Deutschland, founded to help individuals leave extremist groups, are working tirelessly to combat online radicalization and provide support for those seeking to escape its clutches. They offer counseling, education and peer support, creating a safe space for individuals to confront their extremist beliefs and rebuild their lives. Law enforcement agencies are also stepping up their efforts to combat online radicalization, partnering with tech companies to identify and remove extremist content and disrupt online recruitment networks. However, the fight against online radicalization is not just the responsibility of organizations and law enforcement. It requires a collective effort from parents, educators and communities to address the root causes of this growing epidemic. Open and honest conversations about online safety, critical thinking skills, and the dangers of extremist ideologies are crucial in preventing young people from falling prey to online predators and radical content. Parents, while often feeling overwhelmed and ill-equipped to navigate the complexities of the online world, play a vital role in protecting their children from online radicalization. Open communication, active listening, and a genuine interest in their children's online lives can help build trust and create a safe space for young people to share their concerns, anxieties, and online experiences. By fostering a strong, supportive relationship and staying actively involved in their children's lives, parents can help mitigate the risk of online radicalization and guide their children towards a path of empathy, critical thinking, and responsible online citizenship. Section 1. Stemming the Tide Building, a Better Digital Future. The stories we've explored, the lives touched by the dark side of the internet, are a stark reminder of the stakes involved in this battle for hearts and minds. We cannot afford to be bystanders in this digital age, to believe that the online world exists in a vacuum, separate from the tangible reality we inhabit. The internet, for all its wonders and possibilities, has become a breeding ground for extremism, a fertile ground where seeds of hate and division are sown and nurtured. But just as darkness can spread like wildfire in the digital realm, so too can hope, empathy and understanding. We must remember that behind the screens, behind the avatars and usernames, are real people, often young and searching, vulnerable to manipulation and desperate for connection. Our task, our collective responsibility, is to build a digital future where vulnerability is not exploited, where empathy triumphs over hate, and where young people are empowered to navigate the online world with wisdom, resilience, and a strong sense of self. This requires a multi-pronged approach, a concerted effort from parents, educators, policymakers, tech companies, and individuals alike. We need to equip our young people with the critical thinking skills necessary to discern fact from fiction, to recognize and reject hateful ideologies, and to engage in respectful, responsible online dialogue. We need to create online spaces that foster empathy, understanding, and critical thinking. Spaces where young people feel safe to express themselves, seek help, and challenge extremist views without fear of judgment or reprisal. Section 2. A call to action. Choose empathy, choose hope. This is not simply a matter of implementing stricter regulations or developing more sophisticated algorithms. It's about fostering a fundamental shift in our online culture. A move away from the toxic masculinity, the echo chambers of hate, and the normalization of violence that have taken root in certain corners of the internet. It's about reclaiming the digital space as a platform for connection, collaboration, and positive social change. A place where young people can learn, grow, and connect with others who share their values of empathy, respect, and equality. Each and every one of us has a role to play in this endeavor. Parents, it's time to engage in open and honest conversations with our children about the online world, to equip them with the tools and knowledge they need to navigate its complexities safely and responsibly. Educators, we need to integrate digital literacy and critical thinking skills into our curricula, empowering our students to become responsible digital citizens. Policymakers, we must work together to create sensible regulations that protect our children from online harms without stifling freedom of expression or innovation. Tech companies, we have a moral obligation to design platforms that prioritize user safety, well-being, and responsible content moderation. And to every individual who navigates the digital landscape, let us choose empathy over apathy, kindness over cruelty, and hope over hate. The internet has the power to connect us, to educate us, and to inspire us. It's time to reclaim its potential, to harness its power for good, and to build a digital future where all young people can thrive, free from the shadows of extremism and hate. The choice is ours, and the time to act is now.